Hey everybody, this is your Properties of Real Numbers, Unit 1, Formative 1, Video 6. Alright, so some properties of real numbers. We have our commutative property of addition and multiplication. Okay, commutative. The thing that you want to remember about commutative is that the base word is commute. So commute means to move. So if you're commuting from, let's say, Omaha to Bellevue, you're traveling from Omaha to Bellevue every day. So when we talk about the commutative property of addition, the numbers are just going to move around. So from A plus B to B plus A, or in a numerical example, 18 plus 54 equals 54 plus 18. So the numbers are just switched. Commutative property of multiplication works the same way. So if we do A times B, it's the same as B times A, or 12 times a half is the same as a half times 12. So commutative property just means the numbers are being flipped around. Okay? When we talk about, the other thing with commutative property is that there's typically not parentheses when you see commutative property. Okay? Addition property of, or associative property of addition and multiplication. Okay? Associative property means how you associate things. So if we look at this first one here, associative property of addition, the A and B are associated first, and then the B and C are associated secondly. So that means that if we remember our order of operations, we would add A plus B first here in this first part, and then in the second part we would add B plus C first. In the second example here, the numerical example, we would take 23 plus 9 first, and then we would take 9 plus 4 in the second one. Okay, so these are going to equal the same thing though. So this side equals the same as this side. Same thing with multiplication. If we have A times B first, it's going to equal the same as if we take B times C first. And same thing over here, a numerical example, 7 times 9 first is going to be the same as if we multiply 9 times 7 or 9 times 10 first and then multiply it by 7. Okay? So there is your commutative property and associative properties. Notice how they only work with addition and multiplication, not subtraction or division. Okay? So those two properties do not work with subtraction or division. Alright, and then we have a few more properties here. Your identity properties. Well, identity properties means the number just stays the same with something that you do to it. So if we look at our identity property of addition, well, if you add 0 to something, you get that number back. So that would be your identity property. So 5 3/4 plus 0 equals 5 3/4. That's your identity property of addition. Your identity property of multiplication, well, what can you multiply something by and get that same number? Well, you can multiply by 1. So the identity property of multiplication is just multiplying by 1. So 67 times 1 equals 67. Okay? Think back to the addition one too. What can you add to any number to get that same number? 0. So that would be the identity property. Okay, 0 property of multiplication is exactly what the name is. You multiply by 0 to get 0. Anything times 0 is 0, just like that numerical example there. And multiplication property of -1. Well, what happens when you multiply a number by -1? You get the opposite of that number. So -1 times 9 equals -9. Or if we took -1 times -9, you'd get the opposite of -9, which is +9. Okay, so that is your multiplication property of -1. All right, so let's look at some examples here. Our first one here, we have 42 times 0 equals 0. Well, what's happening? We're multiplying by 0, so we know it's going to be a multiplication property, and it's equaling 0. So this is actually going to be our multiplication property of 0. Okay? All right, let's look at letter B. All right, if we look at this one, we have y plus 2.5, parentheses around that, so we're doing that part first. And then the second part, we're actually taking 2.5 plus 28 first. So if we notice, our parentheses move, so this is going to be our associative property because it's changing how things are associated, of addition because it's addition. All right, in letter C, we're adding 0. Okay, so we know it's a property of addition. And what happens when we add 0? Well, it stays the same. So 10x stays the same when we add 0. So this is identity property of addition. Okay, let's look at a few. All right, so we're multiplying 2 times -1 to equal -2. Well, remember what happens when we multiply by a negative? We get negative that number. So this is your multiplication property of -1. Okay. If we look at number 2 here, we have 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 4 plus 2 plus 3. Well, what happened here? The order of the numbers just changed around, right? We don't have parentheses on how they're associated at all. So this is just the commutative property of addition. All right. Number 1 here, 2 times 3 times 5 equals 5 times 2 times 3. Once again, no parentheses. We're not associating things differently. We're moving them around, so this would be commutative property of multiplication this time. And finally, number 2 here, we're multiplying by 1. Well, what happens when you multiply by 1? The number stays the same, so this would be your identity of multiplication. And that is it for your properties. So make sure you go back to my website and take your quiz. We'll see you later.